have connected the mics in the studio, and now we need to adjust the soundboard, which mixes the sound inputs from all of the different mics into the sound that will eventually go on the tape. So we adjust, here's how we adjust the channel for each mic. In this case, we're going to use the mic which is connected to channel 8. First, we make sure that the button here that says LR is pushed. That engages this particular channel. We then push the slider up to the point that says U or unity. Then we just want to make sure that some settings that might have been changed from a previous show are back to normal. Normal for us is to have these blue buttons, the equalizer button knobs, pointing straight up. Also, these red knobs, which are the auxiliary knobs, should always be all the way to the left. 3 and 4, auxiliary 3 and 4, have a special purpose that we may talk about later. Finally, we look at the trim knob, and for the purposes of just doing a preliminary test, we'll just set it to somewhere that's not all the way to the left. So I like to set it up at, say, the 11 or 12 o'clock position. Now we want to test whether that mic is actually properly connected. After we've done these settings, there's one more thing we have to do. We have to go to the master, and make sure it is brought up to the U point. Notice now that you will see that the sound level meter, you will notice that the sound level meter is actually showing a signal now, which we see in the form of these flashing green lights. The exact level is something we'll consider later, but what matters right now is that we are seeing a signal at all. That way we know that the mic is connected, although we haven't finished the adjusting as yet. Finally, if we want to make sure that we can actually hear it into the studio, we have the control volume knob here, which I can turn up, and as you can see, I can hear what's being said in the studio. If it's too loud, if I don't want to hear what's said in the studio, I can turn the control knob volume down. So that's the first part. Having done that, we do the same procedure I just mentioned with all the other mics. So let's just, for the sake of demonstration, do it for mic number 7. Remember, I hit the LR button, bring the unity knob up, make sure that all of these knobs are in the proper position. They haven't been adjusted differently from a previous show. And I make sure that the trim knob up here is at some position other than 0. Straight up is good enough. Now I want to test the sound level for each of my guests. We are going to test the guest who is on mic 8. Keep the trim knob at unity. Don't move the slider. Keep this slider where it is. And to adjust the guest's level, instead we go up to the trim knob that corresponds to mic 8. So here we see trim 8. As I adjust trim 8, I adjust it to the left, and we see that the levels are rather low. There are not that many lights flashing here. If I adjust it to the right, the levels are way up, and in fact, on occasion you will see that it's actually hitting the yellow and maybe even the red line. That means that we are in danger of having the audio distorted. So what we want to do is we want to adjust the trim so that for the most part the levels are hitting the 0 point, which is where my finger is right here. Now, in this example, it's going slightly above 0, so I'm now going to adjust it down a little bit. And it's hitting 0 for the most part. The maximum is 0. So that's about right. So I say, okay, that particular guest is okay. And remember, I'm communicating over the headset with the floor director. And then I tell the floor director, okay, have somebody else do the 60s and 70s count. And we repeat the process again. Keeping the sliders at unity, we adjust the trim tab, the trim knob, so that the lights are all hitting at about 0 more or less.
And that's while the 60s and 70s are going on?
That is correct, for each talent member separately. The floor director, of course, makes sure that there's no other talking going on by anybody else, any of the other talents and so on. It's just that one talent should be talking and doing the 60s and 70s. So that's what I have on setting up the soundboard. Now I do have one other thing which may have to with maybe the aux board, which is sort of something that we would only be concerned with if we had music talent in here. No, okay then. Then all I have to say is that these should all be set to 0. Okay.
So you don't use this one at all? I thought we did use that.
Yeah, okay, now, all right, now Miriam is making a good point. What do we do during the show? This actually, we very rarely need to move this once it's set at the unity. Mm-hmm. But during the show, we may find out that one of the guests who was just talking calmly with 60s and 70s and what they had for breakfast during the test is getting all excited and getting wound up, and her voice goes up. That's when the soundboard operator has to be aware of that and use this slider to adjust it so that the lights are still hitting at about the 0 point.
I did that.
Yeah, now you don't want to ride it too much, because you don't want to ride it too much. You don't want to do it every time that a voice changes. But if you notice that she's getting wound up and her voice is getting higher, then you do a slight adjustment here just to bring it back to where it's. So you kind of look at a pattern. You don't try each particular spike to fix each particular spike, but you look at the pattern of the bouncing. Does it look like it's hitting at about the 0 point most of the time?
So you don't adjust the trim?
Not anymore, not once the show starts. That's what you do before the show starts, doing the 60s and 70s. But once the show has started, you leave the trim alone and you use the slider if you have to.
Now, if there's a sudden noise in the studio, what should you do?
Well, if it's a sudden noise like bang, you know, and then it's over, there's nothing much, you can't react fast enough to make a change.
You can do a cut and re-record that.
Yeah, you would have to, exactly. And in fact, we've had it where we were in the middle of an interview and somebody started drilling outside, you know. They were repairing the air conditioning and you heard a drill going on, and of course you have to cut and decide when you're going to start again.
Do we ever use this button?
What
After everything's set up, do we ever have to make an adjustment here?
I can't see it, no. Only theoretically, but not in the situations we're in. If you make any adjustment, it's going to be on a particular individual mic. And
I would make the point that, as you did, that you shouldn't be sitting there riding these.
No, you don't ride it. You just look at a tendency.
Normal conversation, we are high and we're low, and so in order to make it interesting, you should have that variation.
Well, of course, yeah, and you can't ride it that closely anyway. And people who try, it sounds bad. No, you just look to see if overall she's getting wound up and you know getting.
So, what number should we be striving for?
You want to make sure that it's kind of hitting the maximum is about the 0. Now, if it goes a couple lights up on a couple syllables, no big deal. There's margin. But normally, you want to make sure that most of the time it's hitting up at the 0 point.
And you have to remember which guest is which channel.
Well, there's an easy way to do that. Yeah. The one on the left is 7, the one on the right is 8, the one on that person's right is 9. So just think of it that way.
But you have to know which one the person that you're adjusting is wearing, right?
Well, you know that let's say the one in the middle is getting excited. And
So you know the ones in the middle.
yeah, so you adjust the one in the middle. Yeah, that's a simple mnemonic, you know, left, middle, right, that you see over there.
Sometimes you have a lot of red when someone starts laughing.
Yes.
So
Well, if the laughing is, yeah, but how long do people laugh? Just a second or
you
two.
just have to leave it alone and
Yeah.
let it
Yeah.
go through.
At worst, if it really gets distorted, then the editor may be able to do something about it. But usually that's not a problem. The only real problem is, as I said, if somebody starts speaking louder than they did when they were testing. And that's been known to happen, especially when they get excited.
So we would seldom or never use the blue buttons?
Yeah, they're correct. For our purposes, I think the only person here who would be Carl, who'd use the blue buttons. But yeah, from your point of view, you want to make sure that whoever was playing around with them last night, who may have left them in who knows what position, you just set them so they're the proper way.
Okay, any question, any other thing to add, Carl?
Again, your master volume, sometimes you need that if everybody has gotten
Yeah,
excited.
if everybody's, yeah, if it's,
This is the master.
that is
volume?
correct. This is the, all of these channels, you know, theoretically we can have, well, I don't know, however many these are, you know, together, all coming together, all blending into one chorus of sounds, of audio channels. Well, this one is where all of them come out together. This is the together channel. This is the all together master control, and these are the individual ones. Now, as Carl says, if all of a sudden, you know, it turns into a shouting match, and everybody's talking loud, you know, then you may go for this. Otherwise, if it's just one person, you use the mic on that.
One other thing is when somebody would like to isolate a microphone, what button do they press?
Okay, here we go. We have the solo mic here. This is called this is the solo mic. It means that nothing else will go through. This will go straight into, in fact, it's telling you that it's a solo.
Okay.
So now I turned the solo mic off. If this is the solo, all of a sudden that dies because that mic has been cut out. The one with that's in the studio right now has been cut out because that mic was number 8, and we wanted to feed number 7. Well, nothing is happening on 7 right now. 7 is quiet. That's why you don't see anything there. So if I unsolo 7, 8 is allowed to come back in. So solo and mute are two different sides of the same coin.
Solo
Flashing
makes
red.
the most.
Yeah.
Solo makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Turn on that microphone exclusively. You just want to hear that person speaking.
Yes.
That's when it's flashing, right?
Yes.
It's useful
Here's
doing
mute.
a voiceover.
Here's mute. Notice that mute now is a steady light, and it says that mic 8 has been muted.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get straight in my mind.
Solo
It's
is flashing. It means
Muted.
mic 8 is the only one that's being heard.
Right.
Okay, we're finished.
Yes.